Happy Hanukkah, my dear friends. It's been a while. I'm sorry. This video is a little longer than usual. There's a custom to sit by the lights for a half hour. So I'm giving you what to do for that half hour. It is Tuesday night, the 6th night of Hanukkah, the 14th day of December, 36 days until President Trump is inaugurated to his second term. The prophecies don't actually mention anything about January 20th, but let me tell you what I do know for certain. You know what? I'm going to give you the pieces of the puzzle, and you, my dear listeners, will put it together yourself. Number one, Esau, who became Edom, who became the Roman Empire, which metamorphosed into the Christian Empire, which became Christian civilization, which is now represented by the United States of America, will suffer a crushing, humiliating defeat after its attempts to wrest Jerusalem away from the Jews. How will this come about? Number two, towards the end of the exile, Edom will be split into two. This is the deeper meaning of the prophecy at the end of Daniel, chapter 12, verse 10. Yisparu v'yislabnu v'yitzorfu rabim v'hishiu rishoyim. Many will be separated and will be given clarity and will be purified, but the wicked will be very bad. They will understand nothing. Only the wise will understand. Yispararu, from the Hebrew word borer, means to separate. The good half will be separated. The good half will crush the bad half. This is the meaning of the prophecies in Ezekiel and Zechariah, describing the conclusion of the wars of Gog and Magog. In Ezekiel chapter 38, verse 21, men will turn their swords against one another. And in Zechariah 14, verse 13, on that day there will be great confusion from God in their midst. They will grab hold of each other's hand, with each one's hand raised against the other's. Number three, this will not be done in a natural way. It must be clear that something extraordinary transpired and that God was behind it. In Ezekiel 38:23, God says, I will be magnified and sanctified, and I will make myself known to many nations so that they will know that I am God. Magnified and sanctified, the Hebrew is v'hiskadalti v'hiskadashti. Jews who go to synagogue are very familiar with those words. Yiskadal v'yiskadash shemei rabbah. They are the first two words of the most repeated prayer in the Jewish prayer book, the famous Kaddish prayer, which is recited about 16 times a day. The fulfillment of this prophecy is obviously of great import. The split of Edom into two halves is the reason why we find conflicting prophecies about the end of Edom. On the one hand, the destruction of Edom is prophesied many times throughout the Bible. In the book of Daniel, the destruction of Edom was revealed twice. Once in Nebuchadnezzar's dream recorded in chapter 2. God revealed to Daniel the king's dream, and Daniel repeats this to the king. He says as follows, In your dream, O king, there appeared an enormous statue, the statue which was indeed huge and its radiance exceptional, stood before you, and its appearance was terrifying. The head of that statue was of fine gold, its chest and arms were of silver, its belly and thighs were of bronze, its legs were of iron, and its feet were part iron and part clay. As you looked on, a stone was hewn out, but not by human hands. It battered the statue's feet of iron and clay, crushing them. Then the iron, the clay, the bronze, the silver, and the gold were ground up together and became like shaft of the summer threshing floors. A wind carried them off until there was no trace of them. The stone that battered the statue became a great mountain and filled the entire earth. Daniel goes on to interpret the dream. Regarding the fourth kingdom, which refers to the Roman Empire, which eventually became Western civilization, he says, the fourth kingdom will be as strong as iron, just as iron crushes and wrecks everything. And like iron smashes, so will it crush and smash all the others. And then he tells the king about the stone that crushes the huge statue, that it refers to the kingdom which will be established by the King Messiah. The God of heaven will establish a kingdom that will never be destroyed, a kingdom that will never relinquish its sovereignty to another people. It will crush and bring to an end all these kingdoms, and it will last forever. The second time the destruction of Edom was revealed to Daniel was in his own vision, recorded in chapter 7, where the four empires are represented by four beasts. The fourth beast refers to Rome and Western civilization. Daniel relates, "The fourth beast was dreadful, terrifying, and extremely powerful, with enormous iron teeth that devoured and crushed and trampled with its feet. And I watched as the beast was killed, and its flesh destroyed and dispatched into the consuming flames." Like Nebuchadnezzar's dream, Daniel's dream also ends with the coming of the Messiah. "As I watched in my nocturnal vision, there was a figure like a human being coming with the clouds of heaven. Dominion, glory, and kingship will be granted to him, and all the peoples, nations, and tongues will serve him. His dominion will be eternal, never revoked, and his kingdom will never be destroyed." It is clear from both the dream of Nebuchadnezzar and that of Daniel that Edom and all its manifestations will be destroyed. Furthermore, from Daniel's dream it seems that their destruction will occur before the Messiah comes. The fourth beast is killed and consumed by flames before he sees Mashiach, the Messiah, appear with the clouds of heaven. Which, by the way, is a metaphor that the ascendance of Mashiach will also be miraculous, at least in the sense that it will be completely unpredictable. Regarding the total obliteration of Esav, we also have an entire book of Obadiah. In verse 18 of the single chapter of that book, we read as follows: "Then the house of Jacob will be like fire, the house of Joseph a flame, and the house of Esav will be straw. They will set them alight and consume them. There will be no survivors from the house of Esau, for God has spoken." We also proclaim the total destruction of Esau/Edom in the traditional song we sing after we light the Hanukkah candles. In the song begins with Ma'oz Tzur Yeshuasi. "Restore my house of prayer." This refers to the third temple. "And there we will bring a thanksgiving offering, when you will slaughter our barking foe." This is referring to Edom. And in the concluding stanza we sing, "Avenge your servant's blood from the wicked nation. Our salvation has taken too long. There seems to be no end to the days of evil. Toss the red one to the abyss of darkness, and establish the leadership of the seven shepherds." The wicked nation and the red one in this song obviously refers to Edom. Regarding the seven shepherds, the Talmud records a tradition that these refer to Adam, Seth, Methuselah, who will flank Messiah on his right side, and Abraham, Jacob, and Moses on the left. The first three represent the righteous leadership of all mankind, and the second three represent the leaders of Israel. Here again we see that righteous non-Jews will work together with the Jews to bring morality and holiness to all mankind. But regarding Esau, Edom, we stress their complete destruction, and that God will throw them into the endless pit of darkness and oblivion. That's on the one hand. But on the other, there are many other sources we quoted in previous videos where it talks about Esau working together with his brother Jacob and assisting him in his godly mission. This was the prophecy given to Rebekah when Jacob and Esau were fighting already in her womb. In Genesis 25:23, "V'rav ya'avod tza'ir," the elder will serve the younger. That means he will assist him. And that is what Isaac prophesied to Jacob in Genesis 27:29, "Heye gvir la'achecha v'yishtachavu lecha b'nei imecha." Your mother's son, Esau, will bow down to you, meaning that he will be subservient and work together with you. Isaac repeated this directly to Esau in verse 37, "Hein gvir samtivloch," I have already made him a master over you. And as mentioned, the last leader of Edom, as recorded in Genesis 36:43, is Edom, who is destined to assist the Jews in rebuilding the third temple. Now, as mentioned, the key to these conflicting prophecies is that Edom will be divided. Half will be destroyed, and the other half, the righteous half, will join forces with the Jewish people to fight for God and for his Torah, and for the Temple Mount to be in Jewish hands. Now, this is a very crucial point because the third temple is essential for the presence of God to be manifest in our physical world. In the original tablets of the Ten Commandments, which are housed in the Holy Ark, in the innermost sanctum of the temple. Now, let's put together the pieces of the puzzle. So, there will be an epic battle at the end of our exile between the two opposing halves of Edom, the good one and the bad one. The one that fights for God and His Torah, and the one that represents the exact opposite. This battle started 5,781 years ago in the Garden of Eden between the primordial serpent and mankind. Eve was totally unprepared. She fell victim to the cunning serpent who entered her soul and contaminated it. And ever since, we have been fighting to expunge this darkness from our souls and allow the divine light inherent in our souls to shine brightly. Many have succeeded to one degree or another. Most have not. Slowly, the ranks of the soldiers of light have grown, and the final battle is being fought as we speak. Make no mistake, this war does not pit liberals against conservatives or Republicans against Democrats. Our enemies have declared an all-out war against God Himself. They ridicule God and His Torah. The Torah says that God created two types of human beings, a man and a woman. Genesis 1:27 and Genesis 5:2. These morons believe that human beings are essentially a random pile of molecules assembled by chance, and thus they have no soul, they have no identity, they have no gender, and they have no purpose. We sat by for decades while they took over our country. They banned God from our schools and universities and replaced Him with darkness and stupidity. Now, every form you fill out, and even when you purchase an airplane ticket, you are given the idiotic option to identify yourself as anything you want or as nothing. A form I was given last week at a doctor's office asks the following: what sex appears on your original birth certificate? Female, male, other? Decline to answer. What is your current identity? Female, male, non-binary, trans-female, trans-male, other? Decline to answer. Which pronoun should we use to refer to you? She, he, them, other? Withheld. How in the world did we sit back and let this craziness contaminate our land? Gender dysphoria affects 1 in 30,000 males and 1 in 100,000 females. It is a psychological condition that often goes away on its own and can often be treated. Convincing those who sadly suffer from this that they are completely normal and that in fact nobody knows who they really are and nobody has the right to tell anybody, even their own children, which gender they are, is cruelty of the highest order. Make no mistake. The success of the godless, immoral, radical thinkers of the left to promote the so-called rights of the so-called LGBTQ community has absolutely nothing to do with compassion. It is a very thinly veiled war against God and mankind. It is meant to undermine the obvious truth of the Bible that human beings were created by God to build families and lead moral lives. The modern-day radical left pagans, like the priests of antiquity, denied the existence of a loving and compassionate God of the universe and wished to replace Him with the cruel and pagan Darwinian God of stupidity. The amount of people who unfortunately cannot form a meaningful and intimate bond with the opposite sex are less than 1% of the population. Of course, they deserve our compassion and our love. But compassion for these individuals is not the goal of the left. Their main objective is to eradicate from the other 99% of mankind the biblical perspective that one of the most beautiful things God gave us was the ability of a man and a woman to bond together in love and to bring children into this world who will live moral and charitable lives. Gallup recently conducted a poll, and to their astonishment, the majority of Americans believe that LGBTQs comprise about 25% of our population. In reality, they are closer to 1%. The same massive array of mind-manipulating machinery employed by the armies of the radical left that have convinced so many naive Americans of the centrality of LGBTQ rights, and that upon those rights rests the survival of America as a free and democratic country. These morons have also convinced half of America that President Trump, who did a phenomenal job to bring prosperity to so many Americans and to advance peace in the world, was an illegitimate president who only brought calamity upon us and upon the world. And now they have also brainwashed half of our fellow citizens that the massive piles of evidence pointing to severe voter fraud and manipulation perpetrated by the Democratic Party in this election is completely baseless. What is fascinating is that our sages, in their prophetic vision, saw this. The Midrash is a collection of dozens of ancient books on the Bible, compiled between 1,000 and 2,000 years ago. They contain ancient traditions elaborating on the themes and deeper messages embedded in the Bible. The one we are about to quote is in a book called Vayikra Rabbah, section 27. It was compiled about 1,500 years ago. And I quote, Rabbi Levi said, "The wicked occupy themselves with making evil plans against the Jews, and each one of them says to his predecessor, 'My plan is better than your plan.' Esau said, 'Cain was a fool. He killed his brother Abel in the lifetime of his father Adam. Did he not realize that his father would have more children? I will not do so. Rather, I will kill my brother Jacob after my father dies.' Pharaoh said, 'Esau was a fool. Did he not realize that his brother Jacob would have children during his father's lifetime before he is killed? I will not do so. Rather, I will command my people that every son that will be born into the river shall you throw him.' Haman said Pharaoh was a fool, for he said, 'Every son that will be born into the river you shall throw him.' Did he not realize that the daughters whom he spared would marry men and be fruitful and multiply? I will not do so. Rather, I will decree to destroy, slay, exterminate all the Jews from young to old, children and women, in one day." Rabbi Levi continued, "In the future, Gog from the land of Magog will say, 'The ancient ones were all fools, for they occupy themselves with plans against the Jewish people. Did they not realize that the people of Israel have a protector in heaven? I will not do so. Rather, I will attack their protector, and only afterwards I will attack them. Thus it is written in Psalms chapter 2, verse 2, 'The kings of the earth take their stand, and the princes conspire against God and against his anointed. But the Holy One, blessed be he, will say to Gog, Wicked one, you have come to attack me? By your life, I swear that I personally will wage war against you. Thus it is written in Isaiah 42, verse 13. God will go forth like a mighty warrior. And in Zechariah 14:3, God will go out and wage war with those nations who attack the Jews. And then, V'hoya Hashem lemelech al kol haaretz. God will be king over the world. Now, in case you weren't sure if the Obama-Biden team plans to attack Israel, Obama made it very easy for us to have clarity. Not only with his disgusting maneuver on the 23rd of December, the day before Hanukkah 2016, when he had the United Nations pass Resolution 2334, declaring that the holy city of Jerusalem and the Temple Mount belonged to the bloodthirsty Palestinians and not to the Jews. Hussein Obama made sure to clearly outline the democratic platform for a Biden administration. Make no mistake, Obama is the godfather of the current Democratic Party and the fountainhead of its ideology. Joe Biden is simply his representative. Obama's book just came out on November 17th. It is titled A Promised Land. He spends most of the 768 pages telling us how great he is. But he also makes sure to let everybody see into the darkness of his sick soul as he continues his war against God and the Jewish people and the Messiah. There was an excellent article published in this week's Ami magazine by Rafal Midoff, summarizing what Obama has to say about the Jews and about the land of Israel. He observes that in Obama's version, the land of Israel does not have any connection to the Bible or to history. There were no Jewish kingdoms spanning over 1,000 years in the land of Israel way before the birth of Islam. Jerusalem was never a Jewish capital, and it seems like he never heard of the first and second holy temples. He reminds us that the Temple Mount is one of Islam's holiest sites, without mentioning that it is the most holiest site for the Jewish people. He goes on to distort the entire history of the establishment of the State of Israel. He considers the Jews the aggressors, and he justifies Islamic terrorism and all the wars the Arabs fought against the Jewish state, with the slated goal of wiping Israel off the map. You can read the rest of the article if you want to get sick to your stomach. You're still not sure how evil the Obama-Biden axis truly is? I quote now from a recent article by one of my favorite commentators, Dennis Prager. On Friday, November 27th, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh, the Iranian scientist considered to be the driving force behind Iran's nuclear weapons program for 2 decades, this according to the New York Times, was assassinated in Iran. To appreciate how remarkable this operation was, consider this. Fakhrizadeh traveled a different route to work every single day. He traveled in a bulletproof car and was accompanied by 3 personal carriers that transported heavily armed bodyguards. The entire operation took 3 minutes. None of the assassins were killed or even wounded, and all 12 got away. One would think that every decent human being would welcome the elimination of a man whose life was dedicated to the annihilation of another country. There is, after all, no parallel in the world to the Iranians' regime repeatedly stated goal of annihilating Israel. John Brennan, the head of the CIA under President Barack Hussein Obama, strongly condemned the Fakhrizadeh assassination. Brennan called it a criminal act, highly reckless. He labeled it murder and state-sponsored terrorism. He asked Iran to resist the urge to retaliate and wait for the return of responsible American leadership on the global stage. In other words, wait until the Holocaust-denying, Islamo-fascist, America-hating, genocide-seeking Iranian regime is appeased by a Democrat in the Oval Office. It is hard to accept how dangerously dumb the left have really become, and the enormous power they have in manipulating the minds of millions. It is only now in our generation that we have come to fully understand the famous prophecy about the Messiah in Isaiah chapter 11. V'shofat b'tzedek dalim, v'yichiach b'mishor la'anvei eretz, v'hiko eretz b'shevet piv, u'v'ruach sefos of yamis rasha. He will strike down the wicked of the land with the rod of his mouth, and slay evildoers with the breath of his lips. Now, is the Messiah really going to have the miraculous power of a fire-throwing dragon to vanquish his enemies? Obviously, that is not the intent of this prophecy, but today we could truly appreciate the deeper meaning of this prophecy. Isaiah, who prophesied 600 years before the Common Era, envisioned a time in a distant future in which wars will not be fought with weapons, but with words, with lies and disinformation bombarding the world 24/7 by the massive word war machinery of the radical left. We cannot understand how the pagan priests of antiquity convinced the masses that slaughtering human beings for the sake of the gods will actually bring prosperity and fertility to the worshippers of these cruel and inhumane gods. We can't even begin to wrap our heads around how it is possible that both Plato and Aristotle, who are considered from the greatest minds of antiquity, both recommended infanticide as a legitimate state policy. We actually have a copy of the Roman legal code which permitted a father to expose any female infant or any deformed or weak male infant. As recent as 1991, they excavated a sewer in an ancient Roman village in the Middle East. The excavators were shocked to find the tiny skeletons of over 100 little babies who were tossed down the sewer shortly after their birth. How could we even begin to fathom how the Greeks and Romans would pack stadiums of spectators eager to be entertained by the spectacle of human beings being chopped up alive by other human beings or by animals? And you know what? In 100 years from now, nobody studying our period of time will understand how it was possible that a small group of radical, crazy lefties wielded such immense power and convinced our courts that it is a beautiful and compassionate thing to allow doctors to perform irreversible mutilation of teenagers who suffer from gender dysphoria. Jonathan Benozil was a Talmudic sage who lived around the time of the beginning of the Common Era, about 2,000 years ago. He authored the Aramaic translation of the books of the prophets, based on traditions dating back to the time of Moses. The tomb of Benozil is located in the Galilee, near Tzafat, in the land of Israel. Many have experienced miracles after praying at his gravesite. On the words we just quoted regarding the Messiah, that he will smite the wicked one with the wind of his mouth, Jonathan Benozil identifies the wicked one as Romulus. Now you all know that Romulus was the mythical founder of Rome. Obviously, Jonathan Benozil did not believe in this myth. Rather, he used this term to refer to the spiritual power of Edom, its ideology. Why would he do that? Why not identify him as the biblical Gog, a man of flesh and blood, who is the one designated to lead the war against the Jews at the end of days? I believe we have the answer now. This is not a war against people. The left and their allies and their supporters and all the naive and confused voters who cast their ballot for Obama or for Biden, they are not the enemy. They are the victims. We harbor no personal animosity to them, and God forbid, we do not wish that any physical harm shall befall them. Our enemy is the ideology. That is who the sages designate as the wicked one who will be slain by the Messiah. We have already identified Gog as Obama, and we surely do not want him dead. God forbid. We wish him and his family well-being and prosperity. It is his ideology that needs to be vanquished to the abyss of darkness. The left has used the power of the word to deceive and manipulate. This lethal weapon was used to bring death upon all mankind by the primordial serpent. But just like Jacob outsmarted his deceitful uncle Lavan, the Messiah will use the amazing gift of language granted to him by God to once and for all consign the stupidities of the radical left to the dustbin of history. Now let's sum it up. This is what we know pretty much for certain. The left, represented by the Democratic Party, ideologically controlled by Hussein Obama, and practically by Joe and Kamala, represent the evil half of Esau/Edom that will be crushed and humiliated, most likely before the Messiah comes. And it will be done in a way which is miraculous. That is, it will be very clear that it was the hand of God behind the victory of light over darkness. So when people keep asking me, after watching week after week as Trump's team and all those fighting for honesty in this election have experienced one disappointment after another, and now that the electors have cast their votes, and even Mitch McConnell has conceded, they ask me, can you still believe in your predictions? I remind them of the story of Joseph. Jewish people in synagogues throughout the world listened to the recital of his story recorded in the Torah portion of Vayeshev just this past week. It is in Genesis chapter 37 to 40. Joseph was sold into slavery by his brothers. He was purchased by an Egyptian named Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's ministers. It didn't take long for Potiphar to recognize the greatness of the Jew he had purchased. Honest, hard-working, very devoted to his master, and extremely bright. Before long, Joseph was not a slave, but the minister's right-hand man who was in charge of his entire estate. He earned the minister's complete trust, and he was allowed to run all his affairs without any oversight. Joseph was young, strong, bright, talented, and extremely handsome. He was also single. The minister's wife was chalashing, that's Yiddish for dying, to be intimate with him. Joseph, in no uncertain terms, categorically refused day after day. One day, when no one else was in the house except Joseph and her, she could not contain herself. She grabbed him by his garment and demanded that he lie with her. He left his garment in her hands and ran outside. Seeing that she had no chance of success, and not wanting to live day in and day out with her irresistible lust being denied, she told her husband that Joseph tried to rape her. The minister probably did not believe her, but he wasn't going to argue with his wife. He threw Joseph into prison. The warden in charge was deeply impressed with Joseph. He elevated him from the status of a common prisoner to the one who was in charge of the whole operation. Joseph goes on to successfully interpret the dreams of Pharaoh's chief baker and chief wine butler. Now, before the butler was set free, as per Joseph's prediction, Joseph asked him to take his case directly to Pharaoh and tell him how he was unjustly framed and that he should be set free. The ungrateful butler forgot about Joseph for the next 2 years. Our sages teach us that Joseph was actually destined to be freed at the same time as the butler. Had he put his full trust in God, that destiny would have materialized then and there. But because he sought the assistance of the butler, he had to sit for another 2 years and work on strengthening his faith in God. The obvious question is this: it is a basic principle in Judaism that we are not to rely on miracles to get us out of trouble. We are mandated to put forward our own efforts. At the same time, we need to be fully cognizant of the fact that it is not our efforts in and of themselves which will bring us salvation, but that God will bless us through our efforts. If so, what was wrong with Joseph putting in the effort to have his salvation brought about through the agency of Pharaoh's butler? I believe the answer is as follows. In general, we are not supposed to sit back and do nothing and just rely on God to take care of all our needs. However, when we see that God has chosen to help us in a very direct manner, in those special times, there is no need for us to seek out any agents or to explore natural paths of salvation. After Joseph saw how God granted him success in the minister's home, and that even in prison he was quickly elevated to a respected position, it should have been obvious that God was taking direct care of him, and that he does not need any mortal's help to get out of prison. Now, anyone with eyes that have not been darkened by the forces of darkness and confusion should be able to see with absolute clarity that the entire presidency of Donald Trump was not a natural occurrence. He came out of nowhere with no experience in politics and no ties to the elites who call the shots in Washington. The massive efforts of the radical left to control the Democratic Party and the massive propaganda machines in their employ used every dirty trick to try to remove him for 4 years straight, but they failed miserably. In addition, he has had enormous success in building up the American economy, lifting multitudes out of poverty, standing up to China, making Israel more secure, and the Middle East more peaceful. Only the blind cannot see in all this the hand of God. And that is why it is so foolish to lose hope now. The same God of the universe that was with him until now can easily see to it that he continues to do good things that he is destined to accomplish in the next 4 years. In Numbers chapter 11, the Bible tells us that when the Jews were traveling in the desert, the Egyptians, who accompanied the Jews when they left Egypt, and they were insincere converts, they complained that they were sick of eating the manna, the heavenly food. They wanted real meat. They missed the delicacies that they were used to in Egypt. God was surely not happy with their bickering, but he told Moses to tell them that he will grant them their request, and they will have meat for a full month. Then Moses turns to God and says, how in the world am I supposed to get meat in the desert to feed all these people for a full month? And now God gets angry with Moses and he says, Hayad Hashem Tiktzar? Is then the power of God limited? And then God sent a wind to sweep up quails from the sea. They were spread across the entire camp, reaching a height of 2 cubits above the surface of the ground. So please, stop asking how and when is this election going to be turned over. Hayad Hashem Tiktzar. Is then the power of God limited? Getting back to where we left off about the pieces of this puzzle. The next piece is that this crushing defeat of the left seems to be destined to transpire before Mashiach, the Messiah, comes. And we do not have much time. As we discussed in previous videos, the Messiah must come by the Jewish year 5777, which begins in September 2026. This is for certain. And there are sources that indicate that it will actually happen earlier, quite likely in the Jewish year of 5773, which follows the sabbatical year, which begins in September 2022. Now, while there is nothing in the prophecies that specifically speaks about the current situation, it seems more than likely that the sick ideology of the left, represented by the Democratic Party, is being set up for a massive, humiliating, crushing blow from which they will never recover. We have already quoted from the beginning of the book of Obadiah regarding the demise of Edom. I will make you small among the nations. You will be thoroughly despised. The conceit of your heart seduced you, you who make the mountaintops your lofty abode. And you who say to yourselves, who can ever bring us down? Even if you raise your nest as high as the eagles, even if you establish it among the stars, I will bring you down from there, declares God. After Biden has appointed all his cronies to leading positions in his government, after all the media outlets have declared him our next president, after big tech has put its mega billions behind him, after all the elites in the world of academia and entertainment have declared Biden our next president, and after all the leftist leaders of Europe have called to congratulate him, and after weeks and weeks of uncontrollable laughter and non-stop barking about the stupid, ridiculous, completely baseless, thoroughly outrageous, and laughable claims that the election was somehow stolen from President Trump. After all that, can you even imagine the expression on their faces when the truth is revealed? There is a horrible plague revealed to Zechariah in chapter 14, which God will inflict upon those who declare war against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot as they stand on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets, and their tongues will rot in their mouths. I am very tempted to interpret that this is a metaphor to describe the contorted expressions on the faces of all those employed and brainwashed by the massive propaganda machines controlled by the left when it all comes crumbling down. So when people ask me if I still stand by my predictions, I say to them, the less likely it looks to our eyes, the more likely it is to occur. Because our trust is not in the courts and not in SCOTUS, not in the Justice Department, the FBI, or the CIA, not in the state legislatures, the electors, or the Senate. Our trust is in the Almighty God of the universe. And the less likely it seems to our eyes of flesh and blood, the more the hand of God will be obvious when it actually does occur. How this will unfold, I have no idea. What I do know is that when it does happen, only a fool will not sing the praises of God. Now let me share with you one final prophetic statement from the great sages of the Talmud. In Tractate Sanhedrin, page 97a, the Talmud quotes the verse in Isaiah 59:15, that at the end of days, the truth will be absent, and he who turns away from evil will be considered a fool. The Hebrew word used here for absent is ne'ederes. It comes from the root of the word eder, which means a group. The Talmud therefore takes this end-time prophecy to mean that at the end time there will be several groups who will have access to the truth, but they will go away. So the single word ne'ederes is being used twice. The truth will be possessed by adarim, by groups, but they will be ne'edar. They will be absent. Now why make it so complicated? What is exactly the intent of this unique interpretation? I believe the Talmud is stating that it is not that the truth will be totally absent. There will be many who have access to the truth. As we quote often from the end of Daniel, that at the end of times, v'hamaskilim yavinu, the wise will indeed understand what is going on. However, even groups who do have access to the truth are frightened by the overwhelming power of darkness and are backing away. As we have witnessed over the past while, many Trump supporters have abandoned ship and their numbers keep growing. One by one, supporters of our president are cowering and even surrendering to the enemy. As the Talmud predicted, the good groups are disappearing, and that leaves you and I and others like us who refuse to let our eyes be covered with darkness. In the same tractate, Sanhedrin, page 99a, the Talmud records that there was a certain heretic who approached Rabbi Abahu. He said mockingly, "When do you believe the Messiah will come?" "When you and your colleagues will be covered with darkness," the rabbi replied. "Why are you cursing me?" "I am not cursing you. I am simply quoting a prophecy in Isaiah 60, verse 2. Ki achoshech yichas haaretz va'arafel umim, va'alecha yizrach Hashem. For behold, darkness will cover the earth, and thick clouds the peoples. But upon you God will shine, and upon you his glory will be seen." Let's make sure that when that happens, you and I are still on the right side. As we say in the Halal prayer of thanksgiving that we recite every day on Hanukkah, it is taken from Psalms chapter 113 to 117. "In distress, I call upon God. God answered me, big time. God is with me, so I am unafraid. What can a human being do to me? When God is my ally, I will see the downfall of all my foes. It is better to take refuge in God than to trust in human beings. It is better to take refuge in God than to trust in men of importance. They push me hard to make me fall, but God helped me. God is my strength and my song, and he has brought me salvation. Have a bright and meaningful Hanukkah."